Now, people have eaten plant-based diets for centuries. And if you look at the blue zones where people live the longest, you find the one thing they have in common is they're eating largely a plant-based diet. Now, I'm not saying these folks are all vegan. Most of them have a little bit of flesh in their diet once a week, twice a week, but the vast majority, and this is my plea to you, the vast majority of food that goes down their gullets grew out of the ground and has been minimally, if not at all, processed. And by the way, for the folks who follow Dr. Gundry, who said, don't eat beans, they got lectins. Actually, the one food that all these healthy people eat are beans. They all eat legumes and tomatoes. And if those evil lectins were so bad, these folks would not live to be 100, and so many of them do. A whole food plant-based diet is a major key to longevity. It's not all that you have to do, but it's square one if you want to be truly healthy. So how do you make disease reversal work for you? Start by realizing that within minutes of eating anything, molecules of that food are flowing through every cell in your body where your DNA lies unfolded. And as those food molecules wash through your cells and they wash over your DNA, they play your DNA molecule like a piano. And they turn genes on, they turn genes off. They induce enzymes, they shut enzymes down. Every meal changes us. Every meal brings in not only nutrients, it brings in information, and it changes us on a genetic, molecular level. You don't need to be a geneticist to understand that the genes are going to be turned on by this broiled steak with all the reactive aldehydes and new 5-GC and endotypes and TMAO, heterocyclic amine, AGEs, all these molecules flood through the bloodstream, are going to turn on a whole set of genes that lead to aging, inflammation, or immunity, cancer. They are an entirely different set of genes than those that are going to be turned on by this meal, made of whole, fresh plant foods that flood the tissues with phytonutrient molecules that come from plants. These are antioxidants. They quench free radicals. They promote tissue repair. They are stabilizing molecules. It's all the difference in the world between a cooked animal muscle diet and a whole fresh plant food diet. In computer analogy, it's the difference between 1 and 0. Okay, it makes that much difference. If I can boil it down to one sentence, your genes may load the gun, but your diet and your lifestyle pull the trigger. You may have a genetic propensity towards a disease, but whether it manifests in your particular body or your patient's body largely depends upon the food they're running through their tissues day after day. Yes, the water they drink, the air they breathe, the stress under air, yes. It all plays a role, but it's the food that really makes the difference. Here's an example of this. Here is a genetic readout on the left here of a man with early stage prostate cancer. And all these red panels here, these are oncogenes. These are cancer promoting genes that are actively metabolizing, promoting the growth of the prostate cancer. This man went on a whole food plant-based diet, went through, eat lots of salads and steamed veggies and vegetable soups and Asian stir fries and curries, etc. for 6 months. Ran a whole food plant-based diet through his prostate gland. 6 months later, they did another biopsy. Same man, same prostate, same genes. But look at the difference in the genetic readout. Look at all these red active oncogenes that have now been silenced. They're now turned green. This is the power of food. You want to know how disease reversal works? It's the food, food for starters. Every meal changes us in one of two ways. It starts by, as the food flows through our tissues, it turns on genes directly, like new 5-GC turns on inflammation, but also the food changes the microbes in our gut, and they will change us. There are byproducts get into the bloodstream, up into the brain. They turn on inflammation. They change membrane permeability. Every meal changes us. So how do you start reversing disease? Get real about the food. Because if you don't, especially if you're a clinician, you'll wind up like the blind man and the elephant. You know, the old fable, a bunch of blind men stumble upon an elephant. They each grab a different part. One grabs the tail, thinks the elephant's like a rope. One grabs the trunk, the elephant's like a snake. One grabs the leg, the elephant's like a tree trunk. They all have hold of the same elephant, but none of them have the faintest clue what a whole real elephant really is. Well, that's the same position our beloved medical specialists find their way in, themselves in, when they're dealing with these diseases people bring to them. The cardiologist sees the clogged arteries, the internist sees the high blood pressure, the physiatrist sees the sore joints, the endocrinologist sees the type 2 diabetes, the rheumatologist sees the autoimmune disease, the dermatologist sees the psoriasis, the neurologist sees the dementia, the gastroenterologist sees the Crohn's and colitis, the general surgeon sees the colon cancer. And they're all looking for what's the cause of my particular disease. Gee, they have some common qualities. They all involve inflammation. They all involve oxidative stress and free radical. Gee, I wonder what genetic dysfunction could be causing this. Makes me want to get on the biggest soapbox I could find and yell at all of them. It's the food your patients are eating. You're all looking at the same disease. It's the Western fast food, meat, dairy, oil, sugar, salt diet flooding through their tissues that's creating these various dysfunctions in the various organs. And the organ that complains the first determines which specialist gets seen. But it's basically the same disease. And I tell the docs, listen, when you open the exam room door and your patient's on the exam table, it's never just you and the patient. It's always you and the patient's daily diet for the past X number of years. The patient's diet is the invisible sculptor that's chiseling away on the inside of their arteries and their joints and their skin, creating these diseases you're seeing. And to not share this information with the patient, just to raise their beta blockers and raise their statin doses and their metformin dose and say, come back in a month. If that's the kind of medicine the doctors are practicing, it deprives the patient of the most powerful tool they have to heal themselves, because a whole food plant-based diet will reverse these diseases, or at least make a major step towards greatly improving it, if not completely reversing it.